We will now have the pleasure of hearing from 3 leaders in education. I am honored to introduce our first panelist and the Chief Executive Officer of NYC Outward Bound Schools, Vanessa Rodriguez. And please welcome to the stage our next panelist and this year's Expeditioners Award recipient, Gregory Worrell, Senior Consultant for Education at Scholastic Incorporated. And last, but certainly not least, this year's Educational Leadership Award recipient, NYC Schools Chancellor David C. Banks. Welcome. Yes. And before we start, Vanessa Rodriguez would like to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Marcus. I couldn't begin our conversation without acknowledging the events that happened today in Texas. As an educator, as somebody who's been in schools for over 20 years, it's a tragic moment to see what happened today, and so I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge that and maybe take a moment of silence before we begin. Thank you.
All right, well, let's get right into it, and thank you for joining us, panelists, tonight. And my first question is to you, Chancellor Banks. So we know that in a school system as large and complex as New York City's, it takes a village to support our students and educators. In your list of priorities, you've championed partnerships and the sharing of best practices. Can you tell us more about the role you see partners like NYC Outward Bound Schools playing?
Well, first of all, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
And I just have to say, before I even answer your question, just how impressed I am. First of all, you, Sean, and the ability to come in a room like this and to stand up in front of an audience this large, and someone who came here from China and not understanding the language. I think about myself in her position, not speaking another language, and I don't know that I'd be able to handle it. It's certainly not as confidently as she has. Let's give her another big
Yes.
It's just wonderful and amazing. And for you, Marcus, getting ready to head out and go to Morehouse College, come on.
Yes, sir.
So I want to just tell you also, I have 4 children. They've all graduated from college. They're all grown. I still like them. That's not a given, everybody, right? But I also have 2 my sons who've also graduated from Morehouses. So if you need any connection, you got it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I would say this in answer to your question, that I've been in office now as Schools Chancellor for 5 months. And what I am convinced of, I knew it before I got here, but I'm even more convinced, having traveled to every borough, and I've been in about 50 different schools already. The problems that ail our system cannot be solved by the DOE itself. But they can be solved. And they can only be solved if we are in lockstep, strategic partnership with the right organizations who can help us to do that. There are so many wonderful, amazing CBOs, not-for-profits all around New York City. What I want to do is provide a level of connective tissue so that we're not operating in isolation. I want to make sure that we work with groups like Outward Bound. And you think about what Outward Bound does, right? And I understand everything that's been shared, but things like crew, project-based learning, student-led conferences. You know, it's interesting, it's put on full display by young people such as yourself, who's standing up here tonight and leading this work, leading this conversation. That's not happening at every school, but it can. But it won't if we just tell other schools to figure it out. They shouldn't have to just figure it out. They've got real, live examples of what works. And I've got 4 pillars for how I want to transform the New York City education system. And I think that what you are doing really represents all of the pillars. But the notion of how to reimagine the school experience, when you said just now that it's not just about learning, but why. We're taught why we're learning. That I will tell you, my friend, is not happening in a lot of schools. Many of our schools are just going through the process of schooling. It's the day-to-day routine of going to school. That's not educating. A deep level of education has to involve what is happening here at Outward Bound and understanding why you're going through this educational process. And so I would just simply say to you that I want to continue to work with organizations. I want to have a great strategic partnership, Vanessa, with you and all the work that you're doing at this organization. You can hold me to it. I said it publicly.
Everybody heard it.
You said you're on track for 36,000. We should double that. We should triple that. And when I see a teacher like, I think, Miss Nelson, I salute you. Really, I salute you. And all the other teachers who were also nominated for that award, you could all just as easily have been the award winners tonight yourself. But collectively, what you represent are the best that New York City has to offer. But it's not enough for your expertise to just be weighed in and influencing Marcus and the others in this program. I want to create a system where every child across New York City will have an opportunity to learn from the teachers who are in this program. I want all of our teachers to learn about how you do this work. We want to expand the work of crew. Because otherwise what we continue to have a system of winners and losers. Right. We continue to have a system where there's some kids who are fortunate enough to have Outward Bound, and everybody else, good luck. We have to expand the work that you're doing, and if we do that, we can truly transform New York City public schools, and I'm committed to doing that with you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your insights, Chancellor Banks. And my next question is for you, Greg. Greg, I'd love to know, what was the driving motivation for pursuing your career in education and also for publishing at Scholastic?
Well, I'm going to follow our wonderful Chancellor by starting by saying thank you to Vanessa, Gifford, Allison, the whole Outward Bound team. You all are doing amazing work, and this is such a great evening of inspiration, so thank you to all of you. And in fact, I want to partially answer your question by asking the audience to help me out. Could I get everybody to just turn to a neighbor at your table for a second and just say, isn't it great to be alive and well in New York City?
Yes.
Celebrating.
Right?
Celebrating.
Yes.
Learning.
Yes.
Outward Bound schools.
Yes.
Now, the key words, of course, in that sentence is alive.
It's a good place to start.
A good place to start.
Right.
Alive and well, right? Which is a great thing. But it relates to your question for me anyway, because what you all did and what we're sharing tonight are stories. And what I hear the Chancellor talking about and what I see Marcus doing and you, Sean, and all of you that are so engaged in making a difference is rewriting a narrative, telling a story about what's possible for all young people. And when I think about the work that I've been involved in over the years, for me, it's all about the power of story. It's about what we choose to tell each other, about what young people are capable of. It's about then going out and doing the work, but it starts with what we implant. What sort of stories do we tell each other about who we are, what our capabilities are? How do you win? What does success look like? What does it mean to support one another? What does partnership really look like? Right? So the power of story is something to me that's essential, and I'm proud to say through my work, and I know through the work of everyone in this room, either directly or indirectly, we're reshaping a narrative about what our young people are capable of. And so I'm particularly grateful to Outward Bound Schools, not just for telling great stories, but embodying that story in work that yields people like you, Sean, and you, Marcus. We're so proud of you and grateful for who you are.
Thank you. And just very quickly, I know this may be a little bit off script, but I want to thank you for your insightful answer, Greg. But there was a question that had been on my mind that some of the staff here had asked me before to give my thoughts on, and I wanted to do that. Some structures that I would like to see in place for the vast majority of schools in New York City. And Chancellor Banks already alluded to one of them, CREW, which Outward Bound is actually expanding CREW teaching practices to many schools across the city at the moment, and you'll hear more about that at the latter part of the program. Project-based learning is extremely important for not only the academic success of our students, but also so that our students can have a growth mindset, not a fixed one. And they can also be more motivated to reach a goal, which is what project-based learning did for West End Secondary during the pandemic and allowed the vast majority of our students to be successful. The last piece I would like to see implemented is more peer mediation practices. It is much more efficient for students to be able to disperse problems amongst themselves so that they can not only learn emotional intelligence, but it also creates a tight-knit school community, which some schools who are not as successful as maybe some Outward Bound schools fail at. And these are some practices that maybe you and Vanessa can talk about implementing to more schools now.
We'll try to work it out when you head off to Morehouse.
Right.
We have lots to talk about, Chancellor.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to the final question here, Vanessa. So, Vanessa, you joined NYC Outward Bound Schools in January as the new Chief Executive Officer. So tell us So tell us, what drew you to this organization at this particular point in your career?
Great question. Thank you, Marcus, and thank you both for being here. So there are a lot of things that drew me to New York City Outward Bound Schools. I would say first and foremost are the young people of New York City, like Marcus and you, Sean. I've always been passionate about working with young people, and when I started to learn about New York City Outward Bound, the students were the first thing. I would say the adventure programs that we also run for city youth, it's different, it's engaging, it allows young people to experience things and challenge themselves in different and new ways, as well as the network schools that we have. Our network schools just strike that right balance between demanding academics with engagement and support. I was also very excited to meet the board and the staff. Their work and their commitment to this work is tremendous. And I knew I would have that support in the work that we were trying to do moving forward. And partners, like our Chancellor as well as Greg, it's really important to have these partnerships, and as well as the partners that are all here tonight. I'm really grateful for the work that you do and the support that you give. And those were some of the pieces that really definitely drew me to this work in the organization. I would also say, to your point, Greg, about stories, my own personal story brought me here too. My parents are from Puerto Rico, and they came to the mainland really looking for opportunities, better opportunities, for specifically education. Education for me, education for my brother and our family. And at home, we spoke mostly Spanish, and when I started in school, I struggled. I struggled greatly. I struggled to learn to read, to write in English. I struggled to connect similar to some of the experience you had in school. And it was really challenging. I honestly didn't know if school was something I could do. And what I found is that I was constantly feeling isolated and not connected. And it took a lot to get me to where I am today. So when I learned about the work that New York City Outward Bound Schools is doing, like Crew, and what we've all heard tonight from you, Marcus, and from you, Sean, and your experiences, I knew the impact that that was having on young people. I knew that New York City Outward Bound Schools is creating spaces for young people where they do feel known, they feel seen, they feel they're heard, their voices matter, they feel valued in the classroom. And that was important. We know that there are young people in our work that don't always feel that. And coming out of the pandemic and looking at the experience of a lot of our youth, the challenges they face, not feeling like connected and feeling very much like they were looking to find places where they could be seen and their identities mattered. Crew is something that provides that for our young people. I've seen it in our schools and in our classrooms, and I just want to acknowledge all the principals that are in the room doing this hard work every day for our young people, and we have many of our principals here tonight, so hopefully you'll get a chance to talk with them and hear their experiences. It's difficult work, and to see that our young people are not just finding spaces where they feel they belong, but that they're thriving academically, socially, and emotionally. That's the work that I want to do. That's the work that drew me here. I wish, as a student, as a young person, I had Crew. And as a teacher, when I taught in the Bronx, I taught bilingual classrooms 2nd through 5th grade. I wish I would have had Crew for my students. But I am excited, I am grateful for this opportunity. I'm grateful to be a part of this community that is building school communities where young people do feel they belong, they feel seen, they feel heard. That is the important work. We know that students who have a voice in school are 7 times more likely to be academically motivated than those who don't have a voice. That's the work we have to do. And I'm committed to that, and I hope you all are committed to working with us. I'm scheduling a meeting with the Chancellor as soon as this is over to talk about how we're going to make this work. I'm excited. Marcus, I might need you to come along with me to that meeting. But I am grateful for your support, and thank you both for being here tonight. And Marcus, thank you for the conversation.
For sure. Well, it's my pleasure, and I like to thank you all so much for joining in on this important conversation about education. And so, please, another round of applause for our panelists here.